Hi, I'm Malerie, and this is Between Generations. What stands between generations? Is it time? Is it morals? Is it experience? Are we living in the same world as the generations that came before us? Or have we redefined the new normal? In this episode, From the Inside Out, we tackle the questionable history of policing in Tulsa along with the United States. Join us as we hear directly from law enforcement about how policing has evolved over the years.
It's no secret that throughout time, the relationship between marginalized citizens and law enforcement has been fractured. In the wake of George Floyd's death, there's been a light shown on the unjust treatment of the most vulnerable citizens. Countless protests and demonstrations have filled the United States and the world, all demanding an end to police brutality and injustice. Here in Tulsa, that same message is radiating throughout the city. In September of 2019, the Human Rights Watch released a report, Get on the Ground, Policing, Poverty, and Racial Inequality in Tulsa, Oklahoma, exploring policing activities in Tulsa, namely North Tulsa, an area that is largely occupied by Black people. Studies in the report show that Blacks are more prone to physical altercations, including kicks, punches, tasing, pepper spraying, and other overuses of force 2 times more often than white Tulsans. Studies also show that Blacks are stopped 10 times more than whites. We sat down with a few officers to get their outlook on policing, changes of policing throughout the years, and a better way of policing in Tulsa. Our aim was to speak with 3 officers from different generations. After contacting 3 young officers to add a millennial voice to this conversation, we were unable to secure an interview. All 3 young officers were reluctant to speak about this issue. But here's what we were able to learn from law enforcement. We spoke with 2 officers from different generations who joined the force at different times for different reasons.
I joined in 1983, and my motivation was, at the time, there was a lawsuit where Black officers had sued the city, and there was an opportunity for me to get on, and they were going to pay for I was already a veteran, and they were going to pay for my education, and plus, I thought it would be a great way to make an impact on my community.
So I've been a police officer for 25 years, 7 months and about 20 days, Mahoos County. And I joined the police force in 1995. Moved to Tulsa back in about 1992. And when I came here, they actually had a hiring freeze when Susan Savage was the mayor. And then all of a sudden, my alarm went off, and I heard an interview going saying that they had hired all these new police officers. And I immediately got on the phone. I was like, hey, am I still in consideration? And then next thing you know, I was a policeman. The stock answer is, all my life I wanted to be a police officer, but the true answer is I need a job.
Both officers joined the force at a unique time in TPD history.
When I came here, it was, pretty much right in the middle of the lawsuit involving the class action lawsuit involving the Tulsa Black Officers Coalition in the city of Tulsa, and not having any really established ties here in Tulsa, not really knowing what was going on, but knowing that coming from Mississippi, things appeared to be, a little bit more progressive than where I come from.
Okay.
And so, but then some of the things that, you start to see, it was something that wasn't unfamiliar to me just because of where I come from.
TPD wasn't as different 20 years ago as one might expect. As it is today, 20 years ago, there was a shortage of Black officers.
I joined, there weren't that many Black officers. I think at the time it was only like 35. And it was basically, they didn't, in the community wasn't used to seeing a lot of Black officers back then. They weren't too involved in the community either. We started immediately to make an impact in the community because we had Chief Drew Diamond was then chief, and he was pushing diversity and community policing. Was a big thing back then. And we landed right in the middle of it and welcomed it course, everybody didn't, but
Even with all the efforts to increase diversity, TPD struggled.
So the lawsuit originally started out as a lawsuit involving just one police officer against the city of Tulsa and the Tulsa Police Department because of, unfair treatment, as it relates to discipline and some things like that. And then the lawsuit over time turned into a class action lawsuit involving members of the Tulsa Black Officers Coalition. And in that lawsuit, the things that were brought to attention were, unfair promotional practices, unfair discipline, things of that nature. And then there are myriad of things that came up. And so naturally you get that pushback, okay? There's no way these things are going on. But then once you get into a court setting, and these things have been documented over the years, and when you start to produce document after document, discipline after discipline, when you start to show that this promotion system was unfair, and now, a federal judge looks at that and it's like, okay, wait a minute, these things do take place. When you have one incident, okay, then you have another one 6 months later, 3 months later, there's something else, and now you have that cumulative effect, okay? And, when someone brings issues like this forward, sometimes it's not wise to just push back and say, yeah, there's no way these things are going on. But then when you can prove and show these things are going on, then now you have some issues.
one case where an officer, whenever he'd make make an arrest, he would always play that song, Bad Guys, Bad Boys, Bad Boys, handcuff the guy and have him going down the street with that on his speaker. And then I've actually seen a Native American lady choked, beaten, while handcuffed under arrest. I wrote letters with my displeasure about what was going on. I almost quit.
What year was that?
I believe it had to be after about 86, 87.
Okay.
I saw that and I was gonna quit. I was ready to leave because when I reported it, man, they it's just I guess thin blue wall or whatever. They don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
They didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And I actually saw it.
Yeah.
She was handcuffed.
The system within itself, and I think when we talk about criminal justice, when you get into areas where there are, areas of town or parts of town that, are not as economically advanced or have the advantages of other parts of town, I mean, you're not going to have the same issues on Brookside that you're going to have when you deal with North Tulsa or you deal with the Sand Springs line.
Yeah, you're not having to deal with yoga ladies in North Tulsa.
Exactly. And so what happens is sometimes you tend to police with a heavy hand. When you see a guy riding a bicycle, in the Sand Springs line, first thing that some guys would think is, okay, this guy is probably carrying drugs, or he's a drug courier. See a guy riding a bike on, a $10,000 bike on Brookside or down the Riverside, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
And so what you try to avoid is, and can I say I've seen something, people don't go out and do those things around cops that are, by the book and will pull your coattail if you're out there doing something wrong. But just going through the court systems and going to trials and things like that, you see sometimes like, okay, wait a minute, this guy committed the exact same crime that this guy did, or in my perception, this crime was worse than that crime. How does this guy get 2 years deferred sentence, but this guy gets 2 years DOC and then 5 years suspended sentence?
Although diversity numbers remain low, Marcus and Dean both have seen changes to the force.
Body cameras, we pushed for. It was fought for years. They didn't want body cameras. And now you would have to be pretty stupid. And I think the police brass now are demanding body cameras stay on all the time. When you're in a situation where you're dealing with citizens, public, they got to stay on. So you won't have stuff like that going on. At least I don't think you should, or you would,
Yeah.
if you got any sense.
Yeah.
And then other officers have them too.
Yeah.
So I remember when cell phones first started coming out at the end of my career, and I was kind of upset with people taking, photos, and I was just trying to do my job. And I can see officers becoming agitated at first, but I think now they're pretty much used to it.
Okay.
Because the police department themselves make you wear body cameras.
Law enforcement is changing. It definitely is changing. This younger generation of officers that are coming up, it's like they get it, okay? But when you come into this culture, and just like when I came into this culture as a young officer back in '95, you got choices to make. You're gonna go out and do your job, do it the right way, and not be vocal, because at some point I want to be a detective, at some point I want to be a K-9 officer, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to be on the SWAT team, and in my experience, when you do those things or become vocal, on issues of injustice or social injustice, you can be blackballed, okay, this guy's a troublemaker. Those officers that brought me in, they were called troublemakers. And now you look at John Lewis passing, they was making some good trouble, because that lawsuit ended up making some very good changes, in the police department back in the late 90s, early 2000s. But the young guys get it, they aren't very vocal because they're trying to make their way, but they go out and do their job, they do it the right way. Mistakes made sometime, of course, mistakes are made sometime. But, when I hear a 25 or 30 year veteran, be so adamant in his fight against change within to meet the change of society, then that's when you see where your problems lie. It's us older guys, these younger guys that are coming up, they have good influences, good positive influences, and I'll go out and fight that fight for them. You just go out and do your job and be a good cop and do it the right way.
Although policing in Tulsa is not perfect, there is still love for this city.
I love the history. Tulsa has a very rich history, especially in the black community. We have Greenwood, man. Come on. We have you look back, that's what inspires me. I'm a businessman, actually. And I'm inspired by what occurred during 1921, before that. And my relatives are here, the Burger. I don't know if you know the Burger up north. My people have always been in business. My relatives, I'm a businessman. My trade is police.
Yeah.
But Greenwood.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Between Generations. Though the relationship between minorities and law enforcement have been fractured over the years, we are hopeful that conversations like these can begin to heal the marred relationship. And if you like this video, make sure you hit the like button and press subscribe. Remember to hit all notifications so you don't miss a single episode. Again, I'm your host Malerie, and be sure to join us every other week on YouTube for Between Generations.